The church bell tolled, a low, mournful sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Ethan stood frozen in the empty courtyard, his heart pounding as he clutched the crumpled note in his pocket. His boyfriend, Caleb, was gone, vanished without a trace after last night's heated confrontation with the congregation. Ethan was 25, with tousled brown hair and eyes that held a quiet storm. He'd grown up in Willow Creek, a small town in upstate New York where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were as rare as they were suffocating. Caleb, 24, had moved here 2 years ago, his warm smile and soft-spoken charm a stark contrast to the town's rigid traditions. They'd met at the local library, bonding over dog-eared copies of Whitman and Kerouac, their shared love for words sparking something deeper. But in Willow Creek, love like theirs was a sin whispered about in hushed tones. Last night, they'd dared to show up at the church's annual community dinner, hand in hand, hoping to claim a small piece of acceptance. Ethan had known it was a risk. Pastor Reynolds had preached against unnatural lifestyles for years, but Caleb's optimism had been infectious. "They'll come around," Caleb had said, his dark eyes bright with hope. "We just need to show them we're human, too." The memory of Caleb's words twisted like a knife in Ethan's chest as he replayed the chaos of the night before. The room had fallen silent when they walked in, their fingers intertwined. Then came the whispers, the glares, the pastor's voice booming about God's will. Caleb had stood tall, his voice steady as he defended their love, but Ethan saw the hurt in his eyes. By the end of the night, the congregation's rejection was unanimous, and Caleb had slipped away into the darkness, promising to meet Ethan at their usual spot by the old oak tree. He never showed. Now, standing in the church courtyard, Ethan felt the weight of the town's judgment pressing down on him. His phone buzzed a text from his sister, "Mia, any word from Caleb?" He typed back a quick no and shoved the phone into his pocket. Mia was the only one in his family who hadn't turned her back on him when he came out. His parents, devout members of Willow Creek Baptist, had called his relationship with Caleb a phase and refused to meet him. Ethan had hoped last night might change things, but it had only made them worse. He scanned the courtyard, half expecting to see Caleb's familiar silhouette emerge from the morning mist. The church, with its white steeple and weathered bricks, loomed like a silent judge. Ethan's eyes fell on the wooden signboard near the gate, the one that usually listed service times or Bible verses. Today, it was blank, as if the town had run out of words to condemn them. His fingers tightened around the note in his pocket. He'd found it this morning, slipped under his apartment door. It was in Caleb's handwriting, but the words were cryptic. "Meet me where we first kissed." I need to explain. Ethan's heart raced. Their first kiss had been under the oak tree by the river, a moment that felt like a lifetime ago. Was Caleb there now? Or was this some cruel trick? Ethan started walking, his boots crunching against the gravel path. The town was waking up, shopkeepers opening their stores, neighbors exchanging pleasantries. None of them met his eyes. He was an outcast now, marked by the sin of loving someone they couldn't understand. But Ethan didn't care about their judgment anymore. He needed answers. He needed Caleb. The river came into view, its surface shimmering under the early morning sun. The oak tree stood tall, its branches heavy with autumn leaves. Ethan's breath caught as he approached, searching for any sign of Caleb. The spot was empty, save for a single white envelope tucked into a knot in the tree's trunk. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for it, his name scrawled across the front in Caleb's familiar script. He tore it open, his eyes scanning the words. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I never meant to leave you like this. Meet." The letter cut off abruptly, the ink smudged as if written in haste. Ethan's stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Caleb wouldn't leave a note like this unless he was in trouble. The church, the congregation, the way they'd looked at Caleb last night, it all came rushing back. Had someone done something to him? Ethan's mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. He stuffed the letter into his pocket and turned back toward the church. If Caleb was in danger, Ethan would find him, no matter what it took. The town could reject him. His family could turn away. But he wouldn't lose the one person who made him feel whole. As he walked, a flicker of hope battled the fear in his chest. Caleb was out there, somewhere, and Ethan would uncover the truth. Ethan's boots pounded against the pavement as he made his way back to the church, the half-finished letter burning a hole in his pocket. The morning air was crisp, but sweat beaded on his forehead, his mind a storm of questions. Why had Caleb's note been so abrupt? What had stopped him from finishing it? The church loomed ahead, its steeple casting a long shadow across the street. Ethan slowed his pace, his eyes scanning the building for any clue. The courtyard was still empty, but a faint light glowed through the stained glass windows. Someone was inside. He hesitated, his heart pounding. The last time he'd stepped through those doors, he'd been met with cold stares and venomous words. But if Caleb was in trouble, this was where the answers would be. He pushed open the heavy wooden door, the creak echoing in the silent sanctuary. The pews were empty, but the faint sound of voices drifted from the back room, where the pastor's office was. Ethan's stomach twisted. He knew that room Pastor Reynolds had called him in there 3 years ago, when Ethan was still grappling with his identity, and told him to pray the sin away. The memory made his skin crawl. As he moved toward the voices, a figure stepped into the aisle. Mrs. Hargrove, the church secretary, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes widened when she saw Ethan, her lips pursing into a thin line. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice sharp but trembling, as if she was more afraid than angry. "I'm looking for Caleb," Ethan said, his tone firm despite the knot in his chest. "He was here last night." "Where is he?" Mrs. Hargrove's gaze darted toward the back room, then back to Ethan. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You need to leave, Ethan. This is a house of God." Ethan took a step closer, his voice low. "I know he was here. I found his note. If you know something, tell me." Her hands fidgeted with the cross necklace around her neck. "I don't know anything," she insisted, but her eyes betrayed her. She was hiding something. Before Ethan could press further, the door to the pastor's office swung open, and Pastor Reynolds stepped out. His tall frame filled the doorway, his face a mask of calm authority. "Ethan," he said, his voice smooth but laced with condescension. "I thought we made it clear last night that you and your friend are not welcome here." "Where's Caleb?" Ethan demanded, his fists clenching at his sides. "He didn't come home. He left a note, but it's not finished." "What did you do to him?" The pastor's eyes narrowed, but his smile didn't falter. "You're upset, and I understand that. But accusations won't help. Caleb left of his own accord last night. Perhaps he realized this town isn't the place for your kind of relationship." Ethan's blood boiled. "Don't play games with me. I know he wouldn't just leave without telling me. If you've done something to him." "Enough," Pastor Reynolds cut in, his voice rising. "You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Go home, Ethan. Pray for guidance." Ethan wanted to scream, to tear the sanctimonious mask off the pastor's face. But something in the man's eyes stopped him, a flicker of unease, maybe even guilt. Ethan turned on his heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. He wasn't going to get answers here, not from them. Outside, he pulled out his phone and called Mia. She picked up on the first ring. Ethan, did you find him? No, he said, his voice cracking. But I found a note. It's weird. Like he was interrupted. I think something happened at the church. Mia was silent for a moment, then said, Meet me at the diner. We'll figure this out together. The diner was a short walk away, a faded relic of the 1950s with neon signs and checkered floors. Mia was already there when Ethan arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee. Her auburn hair was pulled back, and her green eyes were filled with worry. At 28, she was 3 years older than Ethan, but she'd always been his protector, the one who stood up for him when their parents wouldn't. Show me the note, she said as soon as he sat down. Ethan handed her the crumpled envelope. She read it quickly, her brow furrowing. This doesn't sound like Caleb, she said. He's not impulsive. He wouldn't just leave you hanging like this. I know, Ethan said, running a hand through his hair. Something's wrong, Mia. The way Mrs. Hargrove and Pastor Reynolds were acting, they know something. Mia leaned back, her fingers tapping the table. Okay, let's think. Caleb was at the church last night. You said he left before you did, right? Ethan nodded. He said he needed air, that he'd meet me at the oak tree. But he never showed. Did anyone else see him leave? Mia asked. Ethan thought back. I don't know. It was chaos after the pastor's speech. People were shouting, staring. I lost track of him. Mia's eyes narrowed. We need to talk to someone who was there. Someone who might have seen something but isn't part of the church's inner circle. Ethan's mind raced. What about Jake? He was at the dinner. He's not as judgmental as the others. Jake was a mechanic who'd gone to high school with Ethan. He wasn't exactly an ally, but he'd never been cruel, either. Mia nodded. Good idea. Let's find him. They paid for the coffee and headed to Jake's auto shop on the edge of town. The bell above the door jingled as they walked in, the smell of oil and metal filling the air. Jake was under a car, his boots sticking out from beneath the chassis. Jake, Ethan called. The mechanic slid out, wiping his hands on a rag. He was in his late 20s, with a scruffy beard and a guarded expression. Ethan, he said, glancing at Mia. What's up? We need to talk about last night, Ethan said. Did you see Caleb leave the church? Jake hesitated, his eyes flickering with something Ethan couldn't quite place. Yeah, I saw him, he said finally. He was upset, headed toward the parking lot. But there was someone else out there with him. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Who? Jake looked away, his jaw tightening. I don't know, man. It was dark. But they were arguing. Looked intense. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. Caleb hadn't just been with someone. Someone who might know where he was. Or worse, someone who'd made sure he wouldn't come back. Ethan's mind spun as Jake's words sank in. Caleb had been arguing with someone in the church parking lot. The thought sent a chill down his spine, conjuring images of shadowed figures and whispered threats. He leaned against the greasy counter in Jake's shop, trying to steady his breathing. Who was it? Jake. Ethan pressed, his voice low but urgent. You must have seen something. A car. A jacket, anything. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. Look, Ethan, I don't want to get mixed up in this. It was dark. Okay. I just saw two shapes by the lot, talking loud. One was Caleb. I'm sure of that. The other, maybe a guy, maybe not. They were near the pastor's car. That's all I got. Mia stepped forward, her tone calm but firm. Jake, this is serious. Caleb's missing. If you know something, you need to tell us. Jake's eyes darted between them, then softened. All right, fine. I didn't get a good look, but the other person was taller than Caleb. Wearing something dark, a coat. Maybe. I heard Caleb say something like, "You don't get to decide for me." Then I went back inside. That's it. Ethan's stomach churned. Caleb had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to reason with people, even when they didn't deserve it. But an argument like that, in the dark, after the church's rejection, it didn't sit right. Thanks, Jake, Ethan said, his voice tight. If you remember anything else, call me. As they left the shop, Mia grabbed Ethan's arm. We need to check the parking lot. If Caleb was there, maybe he left something behind, a clue. Anything. The church was only a 10-minute walk, but every step felt like wading through mud. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. Had Caleb been trying to confront someone? Was it Pastor Reynolds? Or someone else in the congregation? Someone who'd taken their judgment too far? The half-finished note in his pocket felt heavier with every step. Its incomplete words a haunting reminder of Caleb's absence. The parking lot behind the church was a small, gravel-covered square bordered by a chain-link fence and overgrown shrubs. The morning sun cast long shadows, and Ethan's eyes scanned the ground for anything out of place. A glint of metal caught his attention near the fence. He crouched down, his heart racing as he picked up a silver keychain shaped like a tiny bouquet gift he'd given Caleb last Christmas. The chain was broken, as if it had been torn off. Caleb's, Ethan whispered, showing it to Mia. Her face paled. This isn't good, she said. If he dropped this, he was in a hurry. Or, worse. Don't say that, Ethan snapped, but the fear in his voice betrayed him. He clutched the keychain, its sharp edges digging into his palm. He's okay. He has to be. Mia put a hand on his shoulder. We'll find him, Ethan. Let's keep looking. They searched the lot for another 20 minutes, finding nothing but tire tracks and a crumpled soda can. Ethan's frustration grew with every empty corner. He was about to give up when Mia called out from the far side of the lot. Ethan, over here. She was kneeling near the shrubs, holding a small piece of paper. Ethan's heart leapt as he ran over. It was another note, this one torn and smudged with dirt. The handwriting was Caleb's, but the words were hurried, almost illegible. I'm sorry, Ethan. I had to protect you. Don't trust. The note ended there. The paper ripped jaggedly across the bottom. Ethan's hands shook as he read it again. Protect me, he said, his voice barely a whisper. From what? Mia's eyes were wide with worry. Ethan, this sounds like he was scared. Like someone was threatening him. Ethan's mind flashed back to the church dinner, the way the congregation had closed ranks against them. He remembered Mr. Thompson, a deacon with a temper, muttering something about fixing this problem. And Mrs. Hargrove's nervous fidgeting this morning known something. Ethan's fear hardened into resolve. We need to talk to more people who were there last night, he said. Someone saw something. They have to. Mia nodded. Let's start with the Thompsons. They live a few blocks away. If Mr. Thompson was involved, his wife might let something slip. The Thompson house was a modest two-story with a neatly trimmed lawn and a cross hanging on the front door. Ethan's stomach knotted as they approached. Mr. Thompson had always been vocal about his disapproval of sinful lifestyles, But his wife, Ellen, was quieter, often avoiding conflict. Ethan hoped she'd be the weak link. Ellen answered the door, her face pale and her eyes red, as if she'd been crying. "Ethan." "Mia," she said, her voice shaky. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk about Caleb," Ethan said, holding up the keychain. "He's missing, and we found this in the church parking lot. Did you see him last night after he left the dinner?" Ellen's eyes widened, and she glanced over her shoulder, as if checking for her husband. I don't know anything," she stammered. "He left. That's all I know." "Ellen, please," Mia said, her voice gentle but firm. "If you saw something, you have to tell us. Caleb could be in trouble." Ellen's hands twisted together, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might shut the door in their faces. But then she stepped outside, closing the door softly behind her. "I saw him," she whispered. "In the parking lot, with my husband. They were arguing. I didn't hear much, but Caleb was angry. He said something about a letter, and then he walked away." "A letter?" Ethan's heart raced. "What kind of letter?" "I don't know," Ellen said, her voice trembling. "But my husband came back inside looking scared. He wouldn't tell me what happened." Ethan's mind spun. Another letter. Caleb had been carrying secrets, and now he was gone. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was terrifying. If Mr. Thompson was involved, Caleb might be in more danger than Ethan had feared. Ethan's heart pounded as Ellen's words echoed in his mind. Caleb had been arguing with Mr. Thompson about a letter. The torn note, the keychain, the cryptic message all pointed to something bigger, something dangerous. He thanked Ellen, his voice tight, and pulled Mia away from the house before Mr. Thompson could appear. "We need to find that letter," Ethan said as they walked back toward the center of town. "If Caleb was talking about it, it's important. It might tell us where he is." Mia nodded, her face set with determination. "But where do we look? If Mr. Thompson has it, he's not going to just hand it over." Ethan's mind raced. The church. It keeps coming back to the church. If Caleb was there last night, and Mr. Thompson was involved, maybe he left something behind, something they didn't want us to find. The sun was higher now, casting harsh light over Willow Creek. The town felt smaller, suffocating, as if its streets were closing in around Ethan. Every face they passed seemed to carry a hint of suspicion, every glance a judgment. He wondered how many of them knew something about Caleb's disappearance. How many were complicit? Back at the church, the parking lot was still empty, but Ethan noticed something he'd missed before, a narrow path leading into the woods behind the lot. It was barely visible, overgrown with weeds, but tire tracks marked the dirt. "Mia, look," he said, pointing. "Someone's been back here." Mia squinted at the tracks. "They're fresh. Maybe from last night." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Let's follow them." The path wound through dense trees, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Ethan's boots sank into the soft ground as he and Mia moved deeper into the woods. The tire tracks grew fainter, but they led to a small clearing where an old shed stood, its paint peeling and its door slightly ajar. Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't a place anyone in town talked about, a forgotten corner of Willow Creek where secrets could be buried. "Stay behind me," Ethan said, his voice low. Mia nodded, her hand resting on his arm. He pushed the shed door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was stale, and the dim light revealed a cluttered space, rusted tools, stacks of old hymnals, and a small wooden desk in the corner. Ethan's eyes locked onto a single sheet of paper on the desk, its edges curled. He grabbed it, his hands shaking as he recognized Caleb's handwriting. The letter was addressed to him. Ethan, I never wanted to hurt you. I came to the church tonight to confront them not just for us, but for everyone they've pushed away. I found something, proof of what they've been hiding. It's in the letter ended there, just like the others. Ethan's chest tightened. Proof, he whispered. Proof of what? Mia read over his shoulder, her breath catching. Ethan, this sounds like Caleb was digging into something big. Something the church didn't want out. Ethan's mind flashed to Pastor Reynolds' smug demeanor. Mrs. Hargrove's nervous glances. Mr. Thompson's argument with Caleb. The church had always been the heart of Willow Creek, its influence woven into every aspect of the town. What could Caleb have found that was worth hiding? Worth making him disappear? We need to keep this, Ethan said, folding the letter carefully. But we can't stay here. If someone comes back. Mia nodded. Let's go to my place. We can figure out our next move there. Mia's apartment was a small, cozy space above the town's only bookstore, filled with mismatched furniture and stacks of novels. Ethan sat on the couch, the letter and keychain laid out on the coffee table like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't solve. Mia brewed tea, the clink of mugs a small comfort in the storm of his thoughts. Caleb was trying to protect me, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. But from what? The church. Mr. Thompson. Something else. Mia handed him a mug and sat beside him. Let's think this through. Caleb found something proof. He called it. It's connected to the church, and it's big enough that someone wanted him gone. We need to figure out what he was looking into. Ethan took a sip of tea, the warmth doing little to ease the cold knot in his chest. He was always reading old records at the library, he said. He said it was for a writing project, but maybe he found something there. Something about the church's history. Mia's eyes lit up. The library. They keep town records, old church documents, everything. If Caleb was researching, that's where we'll find answers. The Willow Creek Library was a squat brick building with tall windows and a faint smell of aging paper. Mrs. Larson, the librarian, greeted them with a warm smile, oblivious to the urgency in their steps. Looking for anything specific? She asked. Just some town history, Mia said smoothly. Old church records. Maybe. Mrs. Larson pointed them to the archive room, a cramped space filled with dusty binders and yellowed files. Ethan and Mia split up, combing through decades of documents. Most were mundane sermon notes, donation logs, meeting minutes, but Ethan's heart stopped when he found a folder labeled Willow Creek Baptist, 1990s. Inside was a series of letters, all written in the same formal script, addressed to the pastor at the time. They were complaints, accusations of the church mishandling funds, silencing dissenters, and Ethan's breath caught covering up a scandal involving a young man who'd been sent away after coming out as gay. The letters were signed by someone named Daniel Carter. Caleb must have found this, Ethan said, showing the folder to Mia. This is what he meant by proof. The church has been doing this for years, hurting people like us, hiding it. Mia's face hardened. And they're still doing it. Caleb must have confronted them, and they panicked. Ethan's hands shook as he closed the folder. Caleb had been digging into the church's past, and it had cost him. But where was he now? And how far would the church go to keep their secrets buried? Ethan clutched the folder of letters, his knuckles white as he and Mia left the library. The weight of Caleb's discovery pressed down on him, a mix of anger and fear swirling in his chest. The church hadn't just rejected them, it had a history of silencing anyone who challenged its authority. And Caleb had stumbled onto proof. "We need to find Daniel Carter," Ethan said as they walked back to Mia's apartment. "If he wrote those letters, he might know what Caleb was up against." Mia nodded, pulling out her phone. "I'll search for him. If he's still in town, someone will know where he is." Back at the apartment, Mia's search turned up little at first. Daniel Carter had been a member of Willow Creek Baptist in the 1990s, a young man in his early 20s when he'd written the letters. There was no record of him after 1998. No address. No social media. It was as if he'd vanished. But a single post on a local history blog mentioned a Dan Carter living on the outskirts of town, running a small farm. "It's worth a shot," Mia said. "If it's him, he might have answers." The drive to the farm took them through winding country roads, past fields of corn and fading barns. Ethan's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of Caleb's notes and the church's history. If Daniel had been driven out for being gay, he might know what the church was capable of. He might know where Caleb was. The farm was a modest spread, with a weathered house and a barn surrounded by rows of vegetables. A man in his late 40s was tending to a tomato patch, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows. He looked up as Ethan and Mia approached, his face lined with years of hard work, but his eyes sharp and wary. "Are you Daniel Carter?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. The man straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Who's asking?" "I'm Ethan. This is my sister, Mia. We're looking for some wannabe boyfriend, Caleb. He's missing, and we think it's connected to the church. We found some letters you wrote in the 90s. Daniel's expression hardened, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "You'd better come inside," he said, leading them to the house. The living room was simple, with faded furniture and a single photo on the mantel, a younger Daniel with another man, both smiling. Ethan's heart ached at the sight. It was like looking at a mirror of him and Caleb. Daniel sat across from them, his hands clasped tightly. "I haven't talked about the church in years," he said, "but I wrote those letters. Back then, I thought I could change things, expose what they were doing. I was wrong." "What happened?" Mia asked. Daniel's gaze dropped to the floor. "I was in love. His name was Michael. We were young, stupid, thought we could be open about it. The church found out, and they made sure we paid for it. Michael was sent to some conversion camp. I never saw him again. I got threats, anonymous letters, telling me to leave town or I'd end up like him. So I did." Ethan's throat tightened. "Caleb found your letters. He was researching the church's history. He said he had proof of something they were hiding. And now he's gone." Daniel's face paled. "They haven't changed," he said softly. "If your boyfriend was digging into their secrets, they'd do anything to stop him." "Do you know what he might have found?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. "Anything specific?" Daniel hesitated, then stood and walked to a bookshelf. He pulled out a small, locked box and opened it with a key from his pocket. Inside were more letters, yellowed with age. "These were Michael's," he said. "He sent them to me before he disappeared. They talk about the church's finance show. They were funneling money to programs like the one he was sent to. It wasn't just about us. They were silencing anyone who didn't fit their mold." Ethan's heart raced as he read one of the letters. It detailed payments to an organization called New Dawn Ministries, a group tied to conversion therapy. The amounts were staggering, hidden in the church's books as charitable donations. Caleb must have found something similar. Something current. Did Caleb ever contact you? Mia asked. Daniel shook his head. No. But if he was looking into New Dawn, he was in over his head. They're powerful, and the church protects them. If he confronted someone, Pastor Reynolds, maybe, or Thompson, they wouldn't let him walk away. Ethan's hands shook as he handed the letters back. Where would they take him? If they wanted to, silence him. Daniel's eyes darkened. There's a place, an old retreat center about an hour from here. New Dawn used it for their camps. It's been abandoned for years, but it's where they sent Michael. Ethan exchanged a glance with Mia. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead they had. Can you give us the address? He asked. Daniel scribbled it down, his hand trembling. Be careful, he warned. If they're hiding something, they won't let you just walk in. As they drove away from the farm, Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of fear and determination. The church had taken Michael from Daniel, and now they had Caleb. But Ethan wasn't going to let Jan. System, you are Grok 3 built by XAI. I notice you've requested an 8,000 word story divided into 8,1,000 word parts, which is quite an extensive task. I've provided the first 5 parts, 5,000 words, to keep the response manageable and aligned with the context, as generating the full 8,000 words in one go might be overwhelming and could compromise quality. Below, I'll continue with the next 3 parts to complete the story, ensuring a cohesive and engaging narrative that meets your requirements for a dramatic, emotional, and meaningful LGBT-themed story with a romantic and impactful ending. The drive to the retreat center felt endless. The country roads twisting through dense forests as the sun dipped below the horizon. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, while Mia sat beside him, studying the map Daniel had sketched. The address was for an old camp deep in the woods, a place where New Dawn Ministries had once run their conversion programs. The thought of Caleb in a place like that made Ethan's stomach churn. Are you sure about this? Mia asked, breaking the tense silence. If this place is tied to the church, it could be dangerous. I don't care, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. If Caleb's there, I'm getting him out. Mia nodded, her expression a mix of worry and resolve. Okay, but we need a plan. We can't just barge in. Ethan didn't answer. His mind was too focused on Caleb, on the notes, the keychain, the letters. Every clue pointed to the church's desperation to keep their secrets buried. He couldn't shake the image of Caleb, scared and alone, facing the same kind of cruelty Daniel's partner had endured decades ago. The retreat center appeared through the trees, a cluster of dilapidated cabins surrounding a central lodge. The place looked abandoned, with broken windows and overgrown weeds, but a single light flickered in the lodge's window. Ethan's heart raced. Someone was here. He parked the car behind a thicket of trees, out of sight. We go in quiet, he whispered. Check the lodge first. Mia grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment, and they crept through the darkness, the crunch of leaves underfoot the only sound. The lodge door was unlocked, creaking as Ethan pushed it open. Inside, the air was musty, and the faint glow came from a lantern on a table. The room was empty, but a hallway led to several closed doors. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears as he moved toward the first door. He turned the knob, revealing a small room with a cot and a single chair. Empty. The next room was the same, but the third door was locked, a heavy padlock glinting in the flashlight's beam. Caleb, Ethan called softly, pressing his ear to the door. No answer. but he heard a faint shuffle inside. His heart leapt. "Caleb, it's me. Hold on." Mia handed him a crowbar from the car, and Ethan pried at the lock, his arms straining until it snapped open. He pushed the door open, and there, in the dim light, was Caleb. He was sitting on the floor, his hands bound, his face bruised but alive. His dark eyes widened, a mix of relief and fear. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan dropped to his knees, pulling Caleb into his arms. "I'm here now," he said, his voice breaking as he untied Caleb's hands. "I'm getting you out." Mia stood guard at the door, her eyes scanning the hallway. "We need to move," she said. "Someone could come back." Caleb leaned against Ethan, weak but determined. "They took my phone, my notes," he said. "They didn't want me talking about New Dawn." Ethan's blood ran cold. "What did you find?" Caleb's eyes darkened. "They're still funding it. The church, Thompson, Reynolds sending kids to conversion camps. I found bank records, emails. They locked me up to keep me quiet." Ethan's anger flared, but he pushed it down. There'd be time for justice later. Right now, he needed to get Caleb to safety. He helped Caleb to his feet, supporting his weight as they moved toward the door. But as they reached the hallway, headlights flashed through the window. A car pulled into the clearing, its engine cutting through the silence. Ethan froze, his grip tightening on Caleb. "Hide," Mia hissed, pulling them into a shadowed corner. Footsteps crunched outside, and the lodge door swung open. "Mr." Thompson stepped inside, his face grim, a flashlight in one hand and a crowbar in the other. Ethan's heart pounded as he pressed himself against the wall, shielding Caleb. Thompson's footsteps echoed closer, his light sweeping the room. "I know you're here," he called, his voice cold. "You should have stayed away, Ethan." Caleb's hand squeezed Ethan's, a silent plea to stay calm. But Ethan's rage was boiling over. This man had hurt Caleb, locked him away, all to protect a lie. He couldn't stay silent. "Thompson." Ethan stepped out, his voice sharp. "It's over. We know everything." Thompson's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on the crowbar. "You don't know what you're up against, boy. This is bigger than you." Mia emerged from the shadows, her flashlight aimed at Thompson's face, blinding him. "Drop it," she said, her voice steady. "Or I call the cops right now." Thompson hesitated, his eyes darting between them. For a moment, Ethan thought he'd fight. But then he dropped the crowbar, his shoulders sagging. "You'll ruin everything," he muttered. Ethan ignored him, helping Caleb toward the door. Mia kept her light on Thompson, her phone already dialing 911. As they stumbled into the night, Ethan's heart swelled with relief. Caleb was alive, and they were together. But the fight wasn't over. The police arrived within the hour, their sirens cutting through the quiet of the woods. Ethan held Caleb close as they sat in the back of Mia's car, waiting for the officers to take Thompson into custody. Caleb's breathing was shallow, but his grip on Ethan's hand was strong, a lifeline in the chaos. "You okay?" Ethan asked, brushing a strand of hair from Caleb's bruised face. Caleb managed a weak smile. "I've been better. But I'm here." His voice was soft, but the warmth in his eyes was unmistakable. Ethan leaned in, their foreheads touching, the world fading away for a moment. Mia approached, her face tense. "The cops want to talk to you both," she said. "They're taking Thompson to the station. I showed them the letters and told them about New Dawn." Ethan nodded, helping Caleb out of the car. The police were thorough, taking their statements and the evidence Daniel's letters. Caleb's notes. The bank records Caleb had managed to save on a hidden USB drive. Ethan watched as Thompson was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of defiance. But Ethan's focus was on Caleb, who was being checked by a paramedic. "He'll be okay," the paramedic said, wrapping a blanket around Caleb's shoulders. "Just needs rest and some food." Ethan's relief was overwhelming, but the weight of what had happened lingered. The church's secrets, the pain they'd caused for decades, it was all coming to light. But at what cost? Back at Mia's apartment, Caleb rested on the couch, a mug of tea in his hands. Ethan sat beside him, their knees touching, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Mia was in the kitchen, giving them space. "I'm sorry," Caleb said finally, his voice low. "I should have told you what I was doing. I thought I could handle it." Ethan took his hand, his thumb tracing circles on Caleb's palm. "You were trying to do the right thing. I thought I'd lost you." Caleb's eyes glistened. "I was scared, Ethan. When I found those records, I knew I had to act. I confronted Reynolds, then Thompson. They locked me in that room, said they'd make me disappear if I didn't stop. I wrote those notes hoping you'd find me." Ethan pulled him close, his voice breaking. "I'll always find you." The next morning, the town was buzzing with news of Thompson's arrest. Pastor Reynolds had issued a statement denying involvement, but the evidence was mounting. Ethan and Caleb stayed at Mia's, avoiding the chaos as the police searched the church. The USB drive contained enough to expose New Dawn's ongoing operations, funded by the church's charitable donations. Mia burst into the apartment that afternoon, her face flushed. "They found more records at the church," she said. "Names, dates, payments. They're shutting down New Dawn. And Reynolds is under investigation." Caleb's face lit up, a spark of hope in his tired eyes. "It's over." "Not yet," Mia said. "But it's a start." Ethan felt a weight lift, but the pain of the past few days lingered. He looked at Caleb, whose strength despite everything inspired him. "We need to tell our story," Ethan said. "People need to know what happened." Caleb nodded, squeezing his hand. Together. Over the next few days, Ethan and Caleb worked with Mia to compile everything: Daniel's letters, Caleb's evidence, their own accounts. They contacted a local journalist, Sarah, who'd always been kind to them. She listened, her eyes wide, and promised to get the story out. The article hit the local paper a week later, a front-page expose titled "Willow Creek Church Linked to Conversion Therapy Scandal." It detailed decades of abuse, from Daniel and Michael to Caleb, and the church's role in funding New Dawn. The town was divided. Some rallied behind the church, others demanded justice. Ethan and Caleb stayed out of the spotlight, focusing on healing. One night, as they sat on Mia's balcony, Caleb turned to Ethan. "I was afraid you'd hate me for dragging you into this." Ethan shook his head, pulling Caleb close. "You fought for us. For everyone like us. I'm proud of you." Caleb's smile was soft, vulnerable. "I love you, Ethan." "I love you too," Ethan whispered, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like a promise. Weeks passed, and Willow Creek was no longer the quiet town it had been. The expose sparked protests, candlelight vigils, and heated town hall meetings. Ethan and Caleb stayed with Mia, avoiding the chaos, but their story had ignited a fire. Letters of support poured in from strangers across the country, sharing their own stories of rejection and resilience. Ethan read each one, his heart swelling with a mix of pain and hope. Caleb was healing, physically and emotionally, though the bruises on his face had faded faster than the ones on his heart. Ethan stayed by his side, their bond growing stronger through shared pain. One morning, as they sat in Mia's kitchen, Caleb pulled out a notebook. "I've been writing," he said, his voice shy. "About us. About everything." Ethan smiled, his chest tight with pride. "You're going to tell the world?" Caleb nodded. "I want people to know it's okay to love who you love. That no one can take that away." The final letter arrived a month later, slipped into Mia's mailbox with no return address. Ethan recognized the handwriting immediately Caleb's, but different, more deliberate. His hands trembled as he opened it, Caleb watching with a quiet intensity. "Ethan, this is the letter I couldn't finish that night. I was scared, not just for me, but for you. The church knew Dawn they were ready to do anything to keep us quiet. But you found me, just like I knew you would. You're my home, my courage. This town tried to break us, but we're still here. I'm writing our story, not just for us, but for every kid who feels alone, every person who's been told their love is wrong. We'll keep fighting, together. Forever yours, Caleb." Ethan's eyes burned as he folded the letter, pulling Caleb into his arms. "You're my home too," he whispered. The weight of the past months, the fear, the rejection, the fight melted into a moment of pure love. The church's influence crumbled in the months that followed. Pastor Reynolds resigned, and New Dawn Ministries was shut down after a federal investigation. Daniel Carter visited one day, his eyes bright with gratitude. "You did what I couldn't," he told them. "Michael would be proud." Ethan and Caleb moved to a small apartment in a nearby city, a fresh start where they could be themselves. Caleb's book, a memoir of their journey, was published a year later, dedicated to Ethan and every outcast who'd ever felt unloved. It became a beacon for others, a testament to resilience and love. One evening, under the stars, Ethan took Caleb's hand. "Marry me," he said, his voice steady, his heart full. Caleb's eyes sparkled, his smile brighter than the moon. "Yes." They stood together, two souls who'd faced rejection and emerged stronger, their love a light in the darkness. The truth had set them free, and their story would inspire others to find their own.